Welcome to the 2024 year ahead horoscope for Gemini, Sun, and Rising. This is written for the rising sign. Of course, you can watch it for your sun sign as well, and you can really watch it for whatever sign you really want it to, up to your discretion, but it's for Gemini rising specifically. How this video is going to work is we're going to go over the major transits, and then we're going to go month by month and look at the major highlights. But before I get into that, I want to make sure you guys like this video. It does really help out my channel. Comment below. Let me know what your favorite month is going to be or what you're most looking forward to. If you kind of already know what your year is going to look like, I really want to see if any major transits are going to be lining up for you. So real quick, I just want to show you a few things. Number one, just to go over the major transits. The first thing that we've got going on is going to be Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. Now, it will first enter Aquarius on January 20th. It will stay there for about 9 months. It'll dip back into Capricorn for like 5 seconds, and then it's going to permanently stay in Aquarius starting November 19th. So it will be there for the next 20 years. That's a pretty big shift. Then we get the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. This is happening on April 20th. This is kind of the biggest deal transit, in my opinion, of the year. For a lot of zodiac signs, it's really good. I don't really know how I feel about it for you guys, to be honest with you. It's not in the best part ever, not best place ever for your guys' charts, but we'll see. Jupiter ingresses into Gemini on May 25th. This will be really interesting for you guys. I want to say it's good, but I think interesting is just a better word, and I'll explain why, because there's a lot to that. We get the Venus Cazimi in Gemini. We get a lot of Gemini transits, so a lot of things hitting your guys' first house or your sun happening this year. But then we get this Jupiter-Saturn square, which is kind of a bigger deal on a long-term meta scale. And a lot of this has to do with career and work and relationships and yourself. And so that's something that we're going to be covering. That, again, we get 2 hits of that on August 19th and on December 24th. And then by the end of the year, we get this Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer, and that's happening on December 6th. This is kind of like the quote-unquote worst transit, and this is how we go into 2025. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get into January. However, before I get into January, I want to remind you guys, if you want to be up to date with how all of the transits are going to be hitting your chart exactly, go ahead and go to my website and check out the transit calendar that I offer for both your iCloud calendar or your Google calendar. As you can see here on my app, you can see all these little orange things. Can't get it into focus here, but pretty much if you download this calendar, it's only $20 on my website, and it really actually helps support the channel. You're going to get a notification on your calendar of your choice, and it will let you know when a certain transit is hitting a natal placement in your chart, and it'll give you an interpretation of that. So you don't have to go through an app. You don't have to, remind yourself to go through an app. It's just right there on your calendar. It's really, really awesome, and it's specific and tailored to your birth chart. You'll put in your information when you fill out the form, and we'll be sending you an ICS file to download. It's super easy. As well, if you really want to know what this year ahead is going to be like in immense detail, feel free to book a consultation with me, and of course that helps the channel as well. But if you want to support the channel anyway, you can always just hit like, hit subscribe, and comment below. Let me know what's going on. So let's start with January. So January, we have Mercury stationing direct. This is happening in your 7th house of relationships, partner, your spouse, and just specific individuals in your life. Now, what I like about 2024 is at the very beginning, December 31st, Jupiter stations direct, and then January 1st, Mercury stations direct. So there's a lot of forward movement. By this point, every planet is moving direct, and I think there's just this nice feeling of things moving forward at the very beginning of the year. But more specifically for you guys, this is happening in the area of your chart of relationships. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Sorry, I had to get the calculator or the birth chart already pulled up. So the big thing here is by the time we get to the first Mercury stations direct, Mercury retrograded in your 8th house of other people's money, debt, inheritance, but it also retrograded in your 7th house of relationships. Now, your 7th house ruler of relationships, Jupiter, also stationed direct. So there's kind of like a lot more clarity in a situation regarding a relationship. There might have been some miscommunication, some having to work some things out, maybe some fights and conflicts with relationships. That all kind of gets settled out by the beginning of the year. And again, you guys are Gemini rising, so you are ruled by the planet Mercury. So pretty much whenever Mercury is doing something is a lot more important for you than normal, essentially. So we start the year off with that. Then by the time we get to the 4th, Mars ingresses into Capricorn, and this is going on in your 8th house. So other people's money, death, debt, and inheritance. So something to think about too as you're watching this video is knowing whether or not you are a day chart or a night chart. If your sun is above the horizon, so meaning above the ascendant or the descendant, you are a day chart. And if it's below, you're a night chart. Why is this important? Well, this tells us which planets are better or worse. If you were born in the day, Mars transits are typically going to be more problematic versus Saturn transits are going to typically be a little bit more on your side. Mars and Saturn are the two malefic planets, the two bad planets. And if you're born on the day or the night, one is typically better than the other. If you're a day chart, Mars is worse, Saturn is better. If you're born at night, Mars is better and Saturn's a little bit worse. So that'll help you make a little bit more sense of these transits, just knowing that and which one's going to be better. But as Mars moves into Capricorn, if you are a day chart, this will be a little bit more problematic. If you're a night chart, this should be a lot better. But Mars rules fights, conflicts, inflammation, ambition. And we like Mars in Capricorn. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Mars does really well in Capricorn. We just don't necessarily like the house that it's entering, because Mars will be entering your 8th house of other people's money, shared resources, debt, death, and inheritance. Now, Mars rules your 11th house of friends and community and networks, as well as your 6th house of work, routine, health, habits, day-to-day activities. And it's in the 8th house. So there might be this kind of like having to do a lot of like serious work that may not be all that fun. Mars in your 8th house is like burning up other people's resources, your partner's resources. There just seems to be like a lot of like workhorse energy going on in your 8th house, managing debt, managing other people's resources, and you in like a way that like you kind of have to do this. So then we get to the end of January. On the 20th, we get Pluto moving into Aquarius. So we had Pluto dip into Aquarius for a couple months in 2023. And so I want you to think about March, April, and like really about May of 2023. And what was shifting for you regarding spirituality, religion, education, far distance travel, publishing, broadcasting, again, the spirituality stuff. Pluto is about power. It's about corruption. It's about fear. And so as Pluto dipped into your 9th house, there might have been like a general shift in the air around that time, around that area for you. And the 9th house can be a little complicated at times. It can, not all the way be that clear. And in this video, I'm not going to be able to go over everything that Pluto and Aquarius in your 9th house is going to be, because it's going to be there for about 20 years. But we do get that ingress this year a little bit. Let me do this a little quick. We do get that ingress in January, and Pluto will, for the most part, be in Aquarius for the majority of this year. So we move to February. And this is where it gets more interesting for you guys, and also specifically related to Pluto and Aquarius. So when we get to February, we get our first highlight on the 13th. And this is when Mars conjoins Pluto. So Mars ingresses into Aquarius and immediately conjoins Pluto. Again, this is all in your 9th house. Everything in February is all 9th house stuff. So spirituality, religion, education, far distance travel. And if we look at the chart, I want to show you. Let's do that. Go backwards here a little bit. So here's the thing. Mars is fights and conflicts. Mars transiting the 9th house is always kind of like shaking your fist at God. But there's also just a lot of action and energy and ambition going on regarding going back to school, possibly far distance travel, religion, spirituality, publishing, broadcasting, social media. And Mars conjoining Pluto is like a power surge. Like if Pluto, and I mean, Aquarius also rules like, society and people and groupthink and things like that, like the hive mind. And Pluto is having like a long-term transformation with this area of your life, with how you see the world and your spirituality and things like that. But Mars conjoining Pluto is like a revolt, like a revolution, like a, cutting away from a certain group of people or feeling empowered by another group of people. And so this just seems like a real big, like, again, either finding your tribe or separating from a tribe based off like ideological principles. It is your 11th house of friends, and it's in your 9th house of spirituality and religion. And with that conjoining Pluto, there just seems to be like a real big power moment, a big power shift going on with friends regarding beliefs and social media. But it's also your 6th house ruler of coworkers. So this can bring up coworkers, this can bring up pets, employees even. And so this just seems like a power surge is an easier way to say it. A revolt or a revolution is another way to look at it. And so this looks a little bit more problematic on the surface at first. But we get more stuff going on, because then by the time we get to the 17th, Venus is going to conjoin Pluto. Again, this is all in the 9th house. It's the same thing. Now, Venus is a lot different than Mars. Venus is about fun, connection, enjoyment. And Venus in Aquarius is much more connected to groups of people, connected to society, like liking to be, more empathetic or more relatable to, society at large and other people. And so when Venus comes into Aquarius and conjoins Pluto, there's a little bit more of like fun here. Like I almost look at Mars in Aquarius conjoining Pluto as like revolting with people. Like this is all ninth house, so spirituality, religion, social media. And then as Venus comes in, it's like finding more of your tribe, connecting more with people. My only issue is Venus rules your fifth house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, children. So there's something creative going on here. But it also rules your 12th house of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies, fears, phobias. And so you've got your 6th ruler and your 5th ruler and your 12th ruler and your 11th ruler starting to conjoin each other in your 9th house. So this can be dealing with friends and hidden enemies, coworkers, health and routines, and recreation. Like the 5th house also rules drugs and alcohol. So this might be partying with people in a different land or going to travel or something along those lines. But there just is a lot of energy going on in your 9th house. Maybe you're going back to school and you're meeting a lot of new people. Maybe you are connecting more with a different type of group or community than you're used to connecting with. Then we actually have Venus conjoining Mars. Again, this is all in the 9th house. And this is really like having fun with it. Like it's kind of like drama, but you're having fun with it, if that makes sense. Like Mars is, the fights, the conflicts, but Venus is like the fun. So when you have those two connecting, it's like you're being very ambitious and maybe you're dealing with some problems, but it's the friends that you make along the way, essentially. But this is all in the 9th house. So this can just be really, working through what your beliefs are about the world, publishing, broadcasting, again, spirituality. Think of what these, words mean in the context of your own life and what that could possibly look like. Then we get to the 27th and the 28th, and this is when we have both the Mercury and the Saturn cazimi. So a planet goes cazimi at the very minimum once a year. Saturn goes cazimi once a year. Mercury goes cazimi like 6 to 8 times a year. And a cazimi is essentially just like resetting that planet's story. It's like a lot of clarity. It's like that planet's birthday, more so for Saturn than Mercury. But you guys are ruled by Mercury, so most Mercury transits are more important for you than not. And it's in your 10th house of career, reputation, and legacy. So there seems to be a big restart or a big shift going on with career. And I do actually want to show this to you guys. So we get to about, here, the 27th. So Mercury is your ascendant ruler, and it's also your 4th ruler of home and family and living situation. And with it going cazimi in the 10th house, this is like a realization or a clarity or some sort of information being given to you regarding career topics. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's a new start in a job. The issue with it is Mercury's in detriment in Pisces. So it's like, while you are receiving information, that information is not clear. While you might get a light bulb moment when it comes to career stuff, it may not be clear. It's like Mercury in Pisces is not clear communication whatsoever. And then right after that, on the next day, Saturn goes cazimi. Now, Saturn has been in your 10th house since March of 2023. So since March, there's been a lot more restrictions, responsibilities, and maturity having to be had related to career and reputation. And we kind of get that same story being told here where it's like, now you're taking on a new level of responsibility, a new level of maturity, and you're now on a new chapter of that. Between March and June of 2023 was like being introduced to a new sense of maturity and responsibility. Then between June and November of 2023 was like having to work through that, having to figure it out on your own and what that means and what that really looks like. And then from November until here was kind of like, all right, now you've handled that part of your area, you've grown into it, you know how to work with it. Now we're on to a new chapter of responsibility, maturity, limits, restriction, and discipline related to career. That's what's going on here. Now, again, Saturn rules your 8th house of other people's resources and your 9th house of spirituality, publishing, broadcasting, software, things like that. Now, the other thing is your 10th ruler of career has been in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies, the subconscious, fears, phobias, self-sabotage. So there's been quite a bit of career stuff happening for you over this past year. And so this is an opportunity to restart that, if that makes sense. So then we get to March. And the easiest way I can explain this year so far is like January and February are very like hustle grind, like being really busy, doing all the Saturn stuff. March is kind of a weird month. It's a little complicated. And then April is kind of like, you just have to sit back and watch everything go down because there's a lot of stuff happening in April. So the first highlight that we get is the Mars-Uranus square. This is happening in your 9th house and your 12th house. So Mars is transiting your 9th house of spirituality and beliefs, and Uranus is transiting your 12th house of the subconscious and fears and phobias. And Uranus is about like liberation and freedom and innovation, but Mars is like fights and conflicts, and these two planets squaring each other is like things don't bend, they break here. And part of me looks at this as kind of like a real spiritual wake-up call, like a kind of like I don't want to say it's like all good things come to an end, but it's like your beliefs are going to be really challenged in a way where you might feel like you need to revolt. You might feel like you need to push back. You might feel like, like again, a lot of Mars in your 9th house is shaking your fist at God. Mars in Aquarius is being very going against the grain, separating yourself from people, maybe being more charged up by the larger group of people. And as Mars squares Uranus, there's just some instability that's happening here that like really brings a lot of pressure to your belief system and your subconscious where things aren't really lining up. So like I look at this as like a good day for a spiritual breakthrough. However, spiritual breakthroughs aren't like, they're not always like these amazing things. Like sometimes it takes a lot of pressure in order for you to get to a certain conclusion. And that's what this looks more of like to me, in my opinion. So we start March off with that. That's going to be a little bit intense. But then by the time we get to March 11th, this is when Venus enters Pisces. Again, this is your 10th house of career and reputation and legacy. I think whatever work is going on for you guys, it gets much more enjoyable at this point. Because Venus is about pleasure and fun and connecting. She's exalted in Pisces, so we really, really like that. And I just think from here on out, I shouldn't say from here on out, but at least starting here, whatever's going on with work, I know you have more responsibilities and you have to be more mature and more disciplined in this area. And yes, there are more limitations, but Venus here is like, now the door opens up to where you can be more experimental, you can be more creative, you can have more fun. I think one thing too is that it's your 12th ruler. Venus rules your 12th house, so this might be exploring new ways of having fun with work and career that you may not have seen before. It's also your 5th house ruler of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, drugs, alcohol, and children related to career topics. Now, what's interesting about this is the South node's in your 5th house right now. So there's kind of a big moving away from certain pleasures or certain creative endeavors that aren't necessarily like fulfilling you anymore. And so this might be kind of like exploring again something new that might be more fun related to career that maybe you just didn't know before. So we like that. And then Mercury enters shadow. So this is where like from here on out, it's a lot of 11th house stuff. We're talking a lot about friends, networks, communities. There's a lot of shifting happening here. But as Mercury enters shadow, pay attention to this date because Mercury will come back to this degree. Mercury is going to go retrograde in your 11th house of friends, community, and networks. So there will be a miscommunication. There will be a reorganization. There will be some delays, some fights and conflicts verbally. And again, nothing like super duper bad, but there is some shift in the way that you communicate and interact with people that might result from miscommunication or just some sort of delays in not getting back to people. So Mercury enters shadow. And then we start eclipse season. And this is on the 25th. So eclipse season happens for 2 weeks every 6 months, and it's kind of the most wildest time of the year. As Mercury, not as Mercury goes retrograde, as we get to this first eclipse, this is in your 5th house of creativity, love, romance, sex, children, and hobbies. And like I said just a moment ago, the South Node is here. So there is a lot of something that's like, all right, I'm moving away from something. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I don't enjoy this anymore. And this lunar eclipse is kind of like, I need to get rid of this. I mean, the moon does rule your 2nd house of money and finances and resources, and it is in your 5th house. And the South Node can sometimes bring things from the past, but the South Node is also just draining and exhausting. And it's just kind of like, hey, if you're moving up in this direction of career and friends, like the 5th house is the hobbies and activities that you do, and the 11th house is the friends that you do them with. And right now, it's like there's so much energy going on with friends that you're being more pulled to pursue, but maybe there's not a shared common interest on like certain hobbies or recreational activities that, maybe you move away from, like, maybe when you start hanging out with one group of people, you stop doing something else. I think this is also a big look at, again, like children. Maybe if you have kids, this might be a little bit problematic with children, but this is a big kind of like, I'm not enjoying this hobby or this recreation, or maybe I just need to take a pause from it at this moment and just be more social and be more connected with people. So that opens up the doors for the eclipse season stuff, right? So then we get into April. Sorry, let me just get a little water break for a minute. So April's wild. April's really weird for you guys. So first off, we get Mercury stationing retrograde on the 1st. Again, 11th house of friends, networks, and communities. This is some delays, some miscommunications, verbal conflicts. And I only say that because Mercury is in Aries in your 11th house of friends and community and networking. This could be job related as well. So, expect like just some changes going on with friends around this time. Then as we move to the 8th, this is when we get our solar eclipse in Aries. Now, this is our first actual eclipse in Aries. And in my opinion, I just think solar eclipses are bigger deals than lunar eclipses. Fight with me in the comments below if you disagree with that. But solar eclipses are like major endings and beginnings, really big shifts. So this might be either getting rid of friends or making a lot more friends. Because this is on Rahu. This is on the North Node. There's this kind of like real eager urge to go in the direction of community and networking. And the big thing here is, I'm going to pull up the chart in just a second, is right after this, we get this Mars-Saturn conjunction. Mars rules over these eclipses as of right now because the North Node is in Aries, a Mars-ruled sign. And so when we move over to, hold on, let me get this chart all set up here. As we move over to this 10th time, April 10th, there's a lot of shifts going on. We get a Mars-Saturn conjunction, which is a little complicated. Mars rules your 6th house of coworkers, health, pets, day-to-day activities. And it is going to be conjoining your 8th ruler of shared resources, death, other people's money, and your 9th house ruler of spirituality, religion, far distance travel. But it also rules your 11th house ruler of friends. And these are the two malefic planets combining in the 10th house, where there's a real heavy restriction, a very heavy burden regarding career and reputation and friends and coworkers and just responsibilities over things. So this just seems like a very heavy, intense time related to, community and networking and your career and what your, responsibilities and your duties are here. There just seems like there has to be a massive restriction happening here. And this is all during eclipse season, right? Like we have this solar eclipse literally 2 days before in your 11th house of friends as Mars is conjoining Saturn. Real big shift with friends and coworkers related to career. Okay. So then we get to April 20th. And again, this is like the best transit this year for you guys. Not for you guys, just in general. For you guys, it's just really weird because it's happening in your 12th house of isolation, the subconscious, hidden enemies, fears, phobias, self-sabotage. And Jupiter is about abundance. Jupiter is about opportunity. But it's in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobias. It's not the best place in the chart. And so the issue with this is Jupiter rules your 7th house of relationships, and it's in your 12th house of like hidden enemies, subconscious, fears, phobias. So there's been a lot of reflection about like relationships. What do you want? What do you value? Are you in some sort of a self-sabotage? Maybe you've been a little bit more single than usual. But it also rules your 10th house of your career and your reputation and legacy. And it's also in your 12th house of isolation, alienation, self-sabotage, hidden enemy. So there's been like a lot of spiritual investigation into your beliefs and like how you get in your own way and just going through the motions of stuff related to career and relationships, which are big parts of of life. But Jupiter is about opportunities and abundance and expansion, and it's conjoining Uranus, where Uranus is liberation and freedom and instability and shaking things up. And so this seems like a very, just like that Mars-Uranus square was kind of like, things don't bend, they break. This is much more of a breakthrough opportunity. This might shake things up a lot. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe there's something that unexpectedly happens with your job. Same thing with relationships. There's some sort of liberation, some sort of major event going on that was very hidden under the surface related to relationships and career that really comes out. And, Jupiter transits aren't always good. 80% of the time they're good, but at the very minimum, they are really about like, what are your beliefs about this area? Like your 12th house, again, of, repressed, unacknowledged parts of yourself. And, Venus does rule your 12th house. So like, this might be like hidden pleasures, hidden wants that maybe you don't like to speak about. So that's all stuff that's coming up here. And so I really want you guys, if you watch this, throughout the rest of the year, I really want you to comment below and let me know what happens for you. Because I'm just really curious what ends up happening. And so then by the time we get to the end of the month, Mars ingresses into Aries, 11th house, friends, networks, and communities. So two things going on here. Number one, Mars going into Aries is like more fights and conflicts regarding friends. However, Mars is energy, action, and ambition. Now, so you will be spending a lot more time with friends. There will be a lot more energy going on there. But Mars is also conjoining the North Node. Like, it is going to be very easy to initiate conflict with friends, with other people, because Mars is just in Aries. Like, you're ready to fight, ready to get down. But Mars being in Aries in your 11th house is just wanting to be more social, wanting to be like spending more time in activity with other people to like an extreme degree. And so with Mars conjoining the North Node, like the one thing is like there will be this impulse, this like very extreme impulse to be more social, to be going out with people as well as like fighting with people. And just know that like while that impulse will be there and there will be times where that is important, you don't always have to like go pedal to the metal. You don't have to go 100 miles an hour every single time you do it. So just kind of tune in sometimes and learn to check in and when to slow yourself down as Mars goes through Aries. So then we get to May. May is arguably the best month of the year in general. I think June will end up being a lot better for you guys for the most part. But because this May stuff is all in your 12th house. We will have Venus, Jupiter, the Sun, and Uranus all in your 12th house, where there seems to be a lot of like privacy and hiding away, where like, again, the 12th house, yes, is isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears and phobias, but it's also like healing. Like maybe sometimes you just need to go away and like, for example, when you're sick, sometimes you just need to stay at home, watch The Price is Right, and, heal that way. That's very also 12th house too. It's very like Netflix and chill. So May seems really good for chilling for, the Gemini rising specifically. Like, let me just show you the chart in particular. Like, look, we got Venus, Sun, Uranus, Jupiter on your 12th. There's a lot of stuff going on back here, but it's all Venus and Taurus stuff. It's all like just hanging out, chilling, creating a little bit more peace in your life. But the first thing that we get is Mercury leaving shadow. So this whole miscommunication and reorganization with friends, networks, and community is done at this point, and Mercury moves into Taurus like a day or two later. But then we get to the 19th, and this is when Mars conjoins the North Node. And this is like, again, turning up the friendship stuff to the extreme. Mars also rules your 6th house of coworkers, routines, health, habits. And so this might be like hanging out more with coworkers. This might be more, again, I would say hanging out with coworkers, but also just fights and conflicts with friends, a lot more energy with friends, but it's turned up to an extreme. So like, you don't have to fight with everybody. If no one can make the plans, you don't have to be upset, but this is just like your North Node just like consumes and consumes. So you will be very active, I think, a lot at this point. And then at the end of the month, on the 25th, we get Jupiter ingressing into Gemini, which is your first house. So you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. And what's weird about this is, like I said, this is kind of a weird two-way street for you guys. I think June is the better month for the Gemini risings, in my opinion. Let me do this real quick. But what's weird about it is Jupiter rules your 7th house of relationships, and it's in detriment in your 1st house. And it's also your 10th ruler of career, and it's in detriment in your 1st house. Jupiter is again about spirituality and belief. And so a lot of 2024 is like examining you and your body and your image. And, again, what are the things that you're doing wrong? What are the things that you're doing right? Trying to balance two things. Like your 10th house ruler is in a dual bodied sign. So it's like you're trying to juggle things. And while you might have the opportunities to do that here, as you go on throughout this year, it may not, like you might have to pick one or the other or find a better way to balance things. But it's also your 7th ruler in the 1st. A lot of relationship stuff. Like when your 7th house ruler is in the 1st, it's like your partner or your spouse is like at detriment to you, meaning like you might have to take care of them, or you might have to be the breadwinner, or you might be the more supportive person. This also might be like meeting someone. Like your seventh house ruler is in the first, like someone approaches you. Like if you're single, this is a big year about relationships, but more so of like, how do you interact with relationships? What do you want in relationships? That sort of a thing. So the next big thing that we have is once we're actually getting into June now. I like June for you guys. There's just a lot of activity going on in the first house. And the first house is always just like the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th are always just bigger deals in general. But we get this Venus Cazimi in Gemini. In fact, that reminds me of something I wanted to say. Again, this is all in your first house. So you, your body, yourself, your image. The last time we had Jupiter in Gemini was 2012. What was going on around summer of 2012 regarding career and relationships? Did you have bigger opportunities that, gave you some excitement and more confidence in yourself, while at the same time was a little bit challenging to really work through? Think about that. Again, relationships and career wise, but we get this Venus Cazimi, and again, we get every planet goes Cazimi all the time, but every 8 years, Venus goes retrograde in the exact same sign. And every 8 years, Venus goes Cazimi in the exact same sign. And when I say Cazimi this time, this is the exterior conjunction. So what was going on June of 2016? June of 2016 would have been the last time that we had this. Now, what's complicated for you guys is Venus rules your fifth house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, art, music, recreation. And there's some sort of new start regarding this area in you, yourself, your body, your image, your worldview, how you look. But it's also your 12th ruler of like the subconscious and fears and phobias, self-sabotage, being, reclusive. And so there might be something that like you've had in the back of your mind that you've wanted to do or wanted to change that comes out of you by the time we get to the beginning of June. And it's something that you want. It's a pleasure. It's something that is fun for you. Now, what's interesting is the South Node is here. You're moving on from things. There's this long-term kind of draining with creativity stuff, and this might be doing something new regarding that. But what I do like about this beginning of June is look how much Gemini stuff we've got going on. Mercury is in your first house. You're feeling a lot better. It's conjoining Jupiter. This is a big deal with relationships. There's a lot of relationship connection happening on June 4th for you guys, like really good with relationships, but just feeling a lot more clear and confident in general, I think, and just being more okay with certain parts of yourself that maybe you kept more hidden and repressed and coming out with them. And then we get to the 8th. This is when Mars goes into Taurus. So again, Mars rules your 6th house of health, routine, day-to-day activities, coworkers, as well as your 11th house of friends. And it's entering your 12th house of isolation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, and hidden enemies. So I feel like a big part of this time is, possibly some falling out with friends, possibly some health issues as well. When I say health issues, like sometimes it's hard to be an astrologer and know exactly what words to say. It's like, okay, are you going to, get pancreatic cancer and die? Probably not. But feeling a little bit lower energy, not having as much, like again, maybe just getting seasonal allergies or something like that. But it is your 11th house ruler going into the 12th, where this is maybe a falling out with friends, not really enjoying the friendships anymore at this point. Seeing their true character, maybe them sabotaging against you, maybe you sabotaging against yourself, that sort of thing. So some drama happens with friends around this time. And then we get to the 14th and we have this Mercury Cazimi. And again, this is just adding all to the Gemini stuff. So there's so much like that comes into your awareness in like June and like the end of May and June, where it's just like all of a sudden everything's in your face. All of a sudden everything's very clear. And there's a lot of opportunities, but I think this Mercury Cazimi is kind of like the apex or the climax of all this, where it's like, because again, Mercury does rule your ascendant, and like it is Cazimi and it's in Gemini, it's its home sign. So there's just a lot of clarity and a lot of like, okay, this is what's happening. This is what the next couple months or my future looks like. And then we get to the 30th where Saturn stations retrograde. Like I said before, Saturn, since, the beginning of the year, has been moving on into new territory where you've been learning more about what your new responsibilities are and, where you need to be more mature, where you need to be more disciplined, or what your new limitations are. And as Saturn goes retrograde, this is like your learning curve. One way I've been liking talking about both Jupiter retrogrades and Saturn retrogrades comparative to when they're direct is like Saturn going direct is like you're at school, you are doing the school work, you are doing the classroom work. And then Saturn retrograde is like the field work. Like things are a lot different from the classroom versus in the real world. And so Saturn going retrograde in your 10th house of career is kind of like, okay, now you're going to be challenged to implement these new, disciplines or this new sense of responsibility with career. And then you're just going to be learning and growing. And that's, it's not a bad thing. It's just like, you're taking on these new disciplines from January till June. And then by June, it's just kind of like, all right, now you're really working through them and having those mental challenges of like, can I do this? Can I not do this? And so then we get to July. July is where things really start to, I don't want to say chill out, but like the summer into the fall is really boring. It's like the first 6 months of 2024 are crazy. Summer and fall aren't, and then the winter does kind of start to get crazy. But we do have one crazy transit, which is Mars conjoining Uranus. The last time we had this Mars-Uranus conjunction was in 2022. Think about August 1st of 2022. And was there some sort of upheaval? Was there some sort of lashing out or a falling out with friends? Because I want to show you something. So this is happening. Let's do this. This is happening on the 15th. On the 15th. Mars rules your 6th house of friends. It does rule your 11th house of friends, but the 6th house rules coworkers, day-to-day activities, health, habits, and stuff like that, work. And it's in detriment in your 12th house of like hidden enemies, self-sabotage, and it's conjoining Uranus, where there's some sort of like unstable moment, some sort of blow up, some sort of like chaotic rupture happening. But it's also your 11th house ruler of friends here. So it just seems like a big either falling out or just like a big rupture. And it doesn't have to happen because it's like Mars in Taurus, where it's like a very slow rolling, like easily avoidable. But just kind of again, this also might be like illness, just not feeling good. Like suddenly you're down and out. Try to be aware of injuries during this time. Let's not get injured. Like if you're going out hiking, like just take it easy, take it slow. So then we get to the middle of July. We have Mercury ingressing into shadow. So this is happening the next day on the 16th. And Mercury will enter shadow in Leo. This will be in your 3rd house of siblings and neighbors and short distance travel. So there will be some topics that come up here that will become very relevant as we get into August. But Mercury actually retrogrades in your 4th house of home and family and living situation. So there will be some delay. There will be some sort of miscommunication with parents, with living situation, maybe a moving thing, moving down the street, maybe even problems with neighbors. But you'll see that come up on the 16th regarding communication, short distance travel, siblings, and neighbors first. Then we get Mars in Gemini on July 20th. Mars ingresses into your 1st house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. Think about October or really September of 2022 to like March of 2023. We had a Mars retrograde in Gemini. So Mars was in your 1st house for a long time. So a lot of frustration, a lot of like, arguments, yelling. Mars in Gemini is very like, using words as weapons and going back and forth. And so we get a little bit of that. It's not going to be nearly as bad as what the end of 2022, beginning of 2023 was, but that's just the last time Mars was there. So you will be a little bit more agitated, a little bit more aggravated, a little bit more like energized. Again, Mars is your 6th house of like, ill health. Mars does cause injuries like cuts and burns. It's going to go through your 1st house of your body. So beware of that. But then it's also your 11th house ruler of friends. And it's in your 1st house of your body, where this seems, again, much more like, in my opinion, more active for friends and networking and hanging out with people more than anything. But I just think with your 6th house of work, it is kind of like, you're busy, you're doing 2 things, you're juggling things. And we're going to talk more about that in a second because we got a big transit to talk about now that we're in August. I need a water break. So now that we're in August, we get to our first thing, which is Mercury stationing retrograde. And again, this is happening in your 4th house of home, living situation, and parents. So like I said, there's some sort of a delay, a miscommunication, or reorganization regarding your living situation, home, and your parents. This stems from 3rd house activities. So again, short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, communication. Like again, this could just be reorganizing your house. This could be kind of like a miscommunication or a lack of communication with your parents. It could be moving down the street, sort of a deal. This Mercury retrograde is really not the biggest deal in my opinion, comparative to everything else, but it's still there, and you guys are ruled by Mercury, so it's a little bit more important for you guys. Then we get Mars conjoining Jupiter, and this is where it gets like really interesting in terms of like the grand scheme of things this year. So Mars conjoining Jupiter is always like a blow up, like it's always like an explosion. It's always like you're doing this, like you just take it to the limit, like it's like when the levee breaks essentially. And again, it's all in your first house of you and your body and yourself. But let's take a look at it. Let's go ahead and move a month here, and then we'll go back a couple days to the 14th, and then move an hour back. So it's Gemini rising. So Mars conjoins Jupiter. Jupiter rules your 7th house of relationships and your 10th house ruler of career, and it's in your first house of your body. And it's this Jupiter and Gemini, like you're trying to do two things at once, or you're trying to balance two things, and that might be really hard to do. But Mars is your 6th house of like coworkers, ill health, pets, stuff like that, and your 11th house ruler of friends. And just Mars conjoining Jupiter is like at the very minimum, like an aggravated, like, fight, like a lot of just like verbal, violence is maybe a good way to look at it. This might be a blow up between you and a relationship, a very big conflict between you and a relationship. This might be a big blow up at work with coworkers. Really be pay attention to the work in the coworkers area, because this might just be kind of like just letting shit fly and just saying it how it is. And this is the deal. This happens, and this is kind of like an explosive moment, but then we get to the Jupiter-Saturn square. And like I said before at the beginning of this video, this is kind of like the most meta big thing. And Jupiter making a square to Saturn, again, this is in your first house and your 10th house, between you, yourself, your image, your identity, and your career and reputation. And as your 10th ruler is in your first house and it's in detriment in Gemini, so it's like maybe you're being opportunistic and you're trying to do two things at once. This Mars-Jupiter conjunction just shows like maybe you can't do that. And as Saturn is retrograde in your 10th house, where you're like, okay, like we're learning all of what we're responsible for, and you're, kind of going through the motions, Jupiter squaring Saturn is like, fuck, this is actually kind of hard to balance all of this. This is actually a little bit challenging, and I don't know if I can do two things at once. Like feeling spread thin, feeling overcapacitated, or at capacity or overcapacity. And so this is going to be a real deep reflection moment of like, what are your priorities and what can you handle and what can you not handle? A lot of tension regarding relationships and shared resources, a lot of tension between career and your beliefs and other people's resources and you. Just a lot of tension here that's going to be hard to, like, Jupiter and Gemini is very like trying to do two things and have like eat your cake and eat it too. But you just kind of realize here that like maybe that's not what's going to happen. And if you are going to be able to have your cake and eat it too, it is going to be a lot more challenging than maybe you expected. But that's okay. You're going to revisit this once we get to December. So then we get to So then we get to September. September is like the most boring month, except for like one thing that's kind of important. Pluto goes back into Capricorn in the 8th house. All right, like it's almost nostalgic at this point, and it's only going to be there for 2 months, so I'm really not going to hit much on it, but it does go back into Capricorn. Then Venus conjoins the South Node. This is interesting because it's your 5th house of creativity, love, children, hobbies, and Venus going through your 5th house is fun. We like Venus in Libra in your 5th house. Venus is in her domicile, so there's a lot more like it's easier to have pleasure, it's easier to connect, it's easier to enjoy your hobbies. But with it kind of joining the South Node, like I've been saying this year of 23, it's like bittersweet. It's like, I don't know if I like this anymore. I don't know if I want this anymore. I don't know if, this is getting me off the same way. I don't know, like, this is nice. I enjoy it. It's fine for what it is, but I need to move on and do something different. I don't know if this is fun for me. And Venus rules your 12th house, like of, like repressed and unacknowledged parts of yourself. So it might take you some time, but by the time we get here, there's kind of this realization of like, oh, I don't know if I actually like this or I even want this, right? And that brings us to the next day, which is when Mars ingresses into Cancer. Long story short, I'm going to just be real blunt with you guys. This winter is going to suck for money for you guys, but just hang in there, because starting summer of 25 and all through the rest of 2025 into 2026, money is really, 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 really good. But it is going to be stressful once we get to the end of the year. Mars goes into Cancer. Mars, again, is, fights, conflicts, inflammation, fire, and like Mars through the second house is like burning through cash. But it's Mars in Cancer. Like Cancer was like necessity. It's very defensive. And Mars does not do well in Cancer. Mars is about like fights and conflicts, and Cancer is about like babies and, you know, nurturing. Mars in your Mars does rule your sixth house of work and labor, and it's fallen in your second house of money. So this is just like, you got to work to just do whatever cash you can, because this is like very defensive spending. This is spending a lot of money on like necessity things that like you don't want to spend money on, but like you have to. And it's also your 11th house ruler of friends and community being fallen in the second house of money. So maybe not being able to socialize or be there as much with friends because of money stuff. That's kind of a big thing. But that brings us to, where are we at? October. Once we get to October, we get that solar eclipse in Libra, and we get to eclipse season again. Fifth house of creativity, love, children, hobbies. This is a big reset. Think about October of 2023. And what was reset in this fifth house area of love, romance, sex, pleasure? What was a major beginning or major ending that happened for you here? That's kind of, again, what's happening. Where do you need to move on from? What chapter needs to, you know, be thrown out, or where do we need to turn the page in the book regarding love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, drugs, alcohol, that sort of thing? There's a new shift happening here. But then we get to the 4th, and this is when Mars ingresses into shadow. So again, Mars is going to retrograde both in your 3rd and your 2nd, but Mars into shadow here on October 4th. You're going to want to pay attention to this, because we're going to come back to this in by the time we get to what I think it's March of 2025. Mars will be retrograde for a while. This winter is going to be a little bit rough, and that means even the winter going into 2025. But Mars enters shadow. So Mars will come back to this degree. And so, like, again, Mars is trining Saturn and trining Venus. It's like you're working, you're doing fine, but the money's a little bit rough, and there might be an expense here that you know is coming up in a few months that you're going to have to work and save up for in order to tackle. So really pay attention to October 4th with money. And again, with this year with money, make sure you got some, make sure you're saving some, because you will need it by the end of the year. But then we get to Jupiter stationing retrograde. And this is, again, still in your 1st house. Nothing has changed there. And so your body, yourself, your image, your identity. But again, this is kind of coming back to that analogy I used a moment ago, where it's like, you know, Jupiter and Gemini in the 1st house is very like, yeah, like I'm doing these 2 things. And it's, again, things are easier in a classroom. Like things are easier to learn, like when someone's just telling you, but when you actually apply it, it's harder. And Jupiter just going retrograde is like, now we're doing the field work. Now we're really seeing how you believe in yourself. And so Jupiter going through your 1st, like retrograding through your 1st house is a big reflection. Like, what are my beliefs about myself? What are my beliefs about relationships? What are my beliefs about career? And can I do these 2 things? Can I actually accomplish what I want to? And I think there's just a heaviness with your beliefs this year, especially around this time. And again, that changes when we get to the end of December, but this is just really where you do a lot more of the internal reflection. It's not like no one's holding your hand, walking you through stuff, which is what I think a lot of this year is with Jupiter being direct, but here's where you kind of do a lot of the internal work. And so we get back here, and we have a lunar eclipse in Aries, kind of. It's not really an eclipse, but it is coming back to this 11th house stuff of friends. So this is coming back to what we talked about in April. We're looking at friends. What has shifted with your community? What has shifted with your networks? Like maybe you need to bring up more of this friendship stuff, especially related to money and career stuff. So that's going on by the 16th. Then we get to November. November is where we start seeing a little bit more action happening. Mars goes into Leo. Boy, are you guys going to like that one a lot, because just Mars falling in Cancer in your 2nd will not be as fun. Mars will go into your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, as well as communication, technology, your local community. So not like friends in other places, but like literally like your neighbors. As Mars goes in there, there's, again, it's Mars in Leo too. So it's feeling prideful. It's feeling confident. It's feeling, full of yourself. So we like that. And especially related to, where are we at here? Let's just do, 3 weeks? November 3rd. Yeah, we're pretty much there. Especially related to health, work, pets, day-to-day activities, and your friendships. I think it's going to be easier to be more social with friends that are around you, but it's also just like Mars and Leo. So being very arrogant, being very confident, and like, arrogance is sometimes bad, and But confidence is good, right? Like just knowing what that balance is. But this might be getting in more fights and conflicts with neighbors, with siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, that sort of a thing. And feeling a little bit more loud and proud with it. Now, that will be a little bit more specific. Like we got more to talk about that with that. So I'm going to leave it as that. We'll come back to that in a moment. But then Mercury enters shadow. And this is, I don't remember if I mentioned this at all, but Mercury stationing direct at the beginning of January of 2024 was in your 7th house of relationships. And it's really important to pay attention to what's going on with relationships around that time, because that will come back up in a very relevant way by November 7th of 2024. Because Mercury will enter shadow in your 7th house of relationships, your partner, your spouse, and individual. And this whole relationship stuff, like your 7th ruler being in the 1st, been a lot about relationships, but this is where it's time to start working on things. And what are we doing, and the miscommunication and delays and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that when I pull up the chart when we get to the end of November. But when Mercury enters shadow, that's going to be the time to start paying attention with communication there. Pluto is in Aquarius, moves back into Aquarius, and it's staying there for the next 2 decades. What's interesting, though, is from this point, from November of 24 to like July of 25, every major planet moves into a new zodiac sign. Pluto moves into Aquarius, Neptune moves into Aries, Uranus moves into Gemini, Saturn moves into Aries, and Jupiter moves into Cancer. So there's a lot of shifts in the whole world that really begin here, in my opinion. So then we get Saturn stationing direct on November 15th. Again, this is all in the 10th house of career, reputation, legacy. At this point, like you've done enough field work to understand what your responsibilities are, what your limitations are, where you need to be more mature and disciplined, and being able to take that on with confidence, being like, okay, this is what I got to do. It's not, yeah, maybe it sucks. Maybe it's a little uncomfortable, but like I can handle it. I can do it. I've grown up in this way. So I really like that. And that will be important for December. So we're not done talking about that. But then Mercury stations retrograde on the 25th in your 7th house of relationships. And this is what I want to show you. So like what's so interesting to me here is your first ruler, like in my opinion, this is just a really interesting Mercury retrograde for everybody, but specifically for the mutable signs. Because Mercury is in detriment in your ascendant ruler is in detriment in the 7th house. So the planet that rules you is in detriment in the 7th house of relationships. And the planet that rules relationships is in the, 1st house of you. And it's also in detriment. So there's this kind of like, crisscross applesauce kind of a thing going on here, where this is really where the relationship stuff needs to be worked out and communicated and sorted through. It's like you are at detriment to your partner, and your partner's at detriment to you. Like there are ups and downs in relationships. If like you're in a big, long committed relationship, like this is probably not the best of times, but as long as you guys are willing to work things out and just understand you guys both are at a low point. I think another thing, though, is that if like a relationship is started and formulated, or if you are single, like this is where things have to work out. Or if you're still single at this point, this is kind of like, why are you single? What are you doing wrong? How are you looking at other people? It's a really big, weird relationship thing where it's like your hopes and ideals don't align with rationality, and your rationality is really not that clear either. It's a real like. The end of November to December is kind of like, what the fuck is going on here sort of a thing. And it's not all the way bad, but it just gets to a point where you're like, what are we fucking doing? And again, like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You might just find yourself in a situation where you're like, we need to fucking talk. So then we get to December, and by December, Mars stations retrograde. So this is what's really weird is like Mars retrograding in your 3rd house is like, I always talk a lot of shit about the 3rd house because it's so confusing. It's literally the junk drawer of the chart, in my opinion. It rules so many different things. It's going to rule short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, communication, like hardware. This could rule vehicles, cousins, aunts, uncles. How do you utilize the knowledge that you have? And it's your 11th house ruler of friends retrograding in your 3rd house of neighbors, siblings, cousins. So there could be some falling out here, but it's also your 6th ruler of health, coworkers, pets, routines. And the 3rd house also kind of rules schedule too. That's kind of a different thing. And the way I've been looking at Mars retrograding in Leo is like tucking your tail between your legs. Like the cowardly lion, like where Mars and Leo's like, here, I'm ready to roar. Something happens that makes you feel insecure and not confident and not proud. And there's like this big slowdown, especially with, maybe it's car issues. Maybe it's a fight with a neighbor. Maybe it's a fight with a sibling or a cousin, or, there's problems with your schedule and being able to maintain all of it. It's kind of really weird. And I look at Mars retrograde in Leo is also just a really good time to like recalibrate the utilization of your knowledge. Like, but it might just take like a little bit of low confidence for a minute. Like this just, again, looks like the cowardly lion, like sticking your tail between your legs. And there may not be a way to get out of it. Like just sometimes you have to honor that energy and be with that. And so then we get to the 16th, Mercury stations direct. It's still in Sagittarius, so it's still in detriment, but it's like, all right, this miscommunication and this delay, we've talked about things where we work things out. Now there's at least some semblance of clarity and we can move forward from here. But then we get to the Jupiter-Saturn square. And this is where things get really interesting, in my opinion, because this is our second one. And we'll get a third one in 2025, but they'll both be in different zodiac signs. But I want to show you, this is on Christmas Eve. So this is really how we start, like how we get to start next year of 2025. The difference with this Jupiter-Saturn square, Saturn is direct and Jupiter is retrograde. The first Jupiter-Saturn square we got was Jupiter being direct and Saturn retrograde, where Jupiter being direct is like, look at all these opportunities, and Saturn going retrograde is like, I'm still learning how to be responsible with all of this. Now that Saturn is direct, this is like, hey, I know what I have to be responsible and take care of. And Jupiter retrograde is like a little bit less optimistic, a little bit more like, again, this is like consolidation of like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And if you are, it's going to be a little bit more complicated than you might imagine. And this does have to deal with responsibilities in relationships and in work, related to other people's resources, related to spirituality and beliefs. So this is a weird year for you guys. Like it's kind of complicated, but this is exactly what this year is going to look like. What I can do as an astrologer is give you the context of the astrology, and then you put those pieces together for your own life and what you might see. However, let me know in the comments below what months you're looking forward to, what months you're not looking forward to, and if anything is connecting for you guys, like, maybe you've got plans in August and December, and what does that really look like? Let me know in the comments below. And again, if you want to support the channel, make sure you like this video. If you do like this video, subscribe if you want to be up to date with all of the transits of 2024 as we go through them. And again, make sure to get that transit calendar for your iPhone or for your Google Calendar. It is awesome. It always keeps me up to date with what's going on, and I actually really love it for myself too. Book a consultation with me if you really want to get in depth with everything that's going on in your chart and in your life. And with that being said, I'll be seeing you guys next time.